Good evening. I'm Marian Winnick, here to welcome you to the National Book Critics Circle Finalists Reading for Publishing Year 2022. We've asked each of our wonderful finalist authors to select a 2-minute excerpt from their books. Following the program, you can download at the Wildbound registration page. We'll start with our new award, the Greg Barrios Prize for a Book in Translation, followed by the John Leonard First Book Prize, then autobiography, biography, criticism, poetry, nonfiction, and fiction. Tomorrow night at the New School in New York City, the winners in each of these categories will be announced, and all the finalists will be celebrated at a reception to follow. Please join us if you're in the neighborhood. Throughout the event, you'll see a donate button on the screen. Every cent of the money we collect goes to our Awards, Fellowships, and Initiatives Fund, which supports community-facing initiatives designed with our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind. From my home in Baltimore, Maryland, to all of you joining us around the country and around the world, warm wishes for a safe and happy spring. Thank you for your support of the National Book Critics Circle and literary culture worldwide. Take it away, Boris.
Hello, my name is Boris Treluk, and I'm the translator of Andrei Kurkov's Gray Bees. He left behind him a war in which he had taken no part, in which he had simply happened to have found himself dwelling. Yes, he had been a resident of war, an unenviable fate, but one far more bearable for people than for bees. If it weren't for the bees, he wouldn't have gone anywhere. He would have taken pity on Pashka and not left him all alone. But bees don't understand what war is. Bees can't switch from peace to war and back again, as people do. They must be allowed to perform their main task, the only task in their power, to which they were appointed by nature and by God, collecting and spreading pollen. That's why he had to go, to drive them out to where it was quiet, where the air was gradually filling with the sweetness of blossoming herbs, where the choir of these herbs would soon be supported by the choir of flowering cherry, apple, apricot, and acacia trees. At the next checkpoint, he was held for 3 minutes, no longer. All they did was look at his passport and the piece of paper he had been issued with. Then he stopped twice more in response to warning signs of increased road control. There, too, everything went smoothly, and 2 hours later, his headlights picked out a large sign on the side of the road. You are now entering the Zaporizhia region. There was nothing particularly cheerful in these words. They didn't promise to fulfill some secret childhood dream or anything, but as soon as the sign was behind him, tears welled up in Sergey's eyes, as if a great weight had fallen from his shoulders. He glanced down at the speedometer and pressed the brake pedal again. Don't rush, he told himself, and stared with tired eyes at the deserted road, which was well lit by his high beams and bordered on both sides by apricot trees, the usual companions of southern Ukrainian drivers, beside which in 2 or 3 months, anyone who wasn't too lazy or had no other gifts for their kids would stop on their way home. They would stop and pick up ripe orange apricots from the grass, 3 in a bag or a cardboard box, and 1 in the mouth. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jasmina Barrera. I'm the author of Línea Negra. I'm going to read a brief passage in Spanish, and then Cristina McSweeney, the translator, will read it in English. Natalia Ginsburg tiene un ensayo sobre el aborto, a favor del derecho a decidir, donde dice acerca del bebé en el útero que es una forma sin ojos ni voz, el proyecto remoto y pálido de una persona, una individualidad concreta y real posibilidad viviente. Y sobre la decisión de dar vida a alguien o no, si nos ponemos a pensar en lo que puede deparar el destino, si nos preguntamos si no sería sensato y justo no dar nunca a la vida y elegir siempre la nada. Otra, amar la vida y creer en ella significa también amar su dolor, significa amar la época en la que hemos nacido y sus abismos de terror, y significa amar del destino, su oscuridad y su tremendo carácter imprevisible. Nunca antes, como ahora, había estado tan a favor de despenalizar el aborto. Esta transformación tan brutal del cuerpo solo debe suceder si la mujer está dispuesta, si lo desea fervorosamente. Nadie que no quiera pasar por esto debería estar obligada a hacerlo.
I am Cristina McSweeney, and I'm the translator of Jasmina Barrera's Línea Negra. Natalia Ginsburg wrote an essay on abortion in favor of a woman's right to choose, in which she says that the child in the womb is a form without voice or eyes, the pale, distant project of a person, a concrete individuality and a real living possibility. On the decision of whether or not to give life to someone, she says, if we stop to think about what fate might hold for us, we wonder whether it might not be rational, just and proper, never to choose life, always nothingness. And again, loving life and believing in it also means loving pain. It means loving the era in which we are born and the depths of horror. And it means loving the darkness and tremendous unpredictability of fate. I've never been so strongly in favor of decriminalizing abortion as now, when I'm pregnant. The brutal transformation of the body should only occur if a woman is willing, if she wants it fervently. Absolutely no woman who does not want to go through all this should be obliged to do so.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Croft, and I'm the translator of Olga Tokarczuk's The Books of Jacob. I'm just going to read the very brief prologue. Once swallowed, the piece of paper lodges in her esophagus, near her heart, saliva soaked. The specially prepared black ink dissolves slowly now, the letters losing their shapes. Within the human body, the word splits in two, substance and essence. When the former goes, the latter, formlessly abiding, may be absorbed into the body's tissues, since essences always seek carriers in matter, even if this is to be the cause of many misfortunes. Yenta wakes up, but she was just almost dead. She feels this distinctly now, like a pain, like the river's current, a tremor, a clamor, a rush. With a delicate vibration, her heart resumes its weak but regular beating, capable. Warmth is restored to her bony, withered chest. Yenta blinks and just barely lifts her eyelids again. She sees the agonized face of Elisha Shore, who leans in over her. She tries to smile, but that much power over her face she can't quite summon. Elisha Shore's brow is furrowed, his gaze brimming with resentment. His lips move, but no sound reaches Yenta. Old Shore's big hands appear from somewhere, reaching for her neck, then move beneath her threadbare blanket. Clumsily, he rolls her body onto the side so he can check the bedding. Yenta can't feel his exertions. No, she senses only warmth and the presence of a sweaty, bearded man. Then suddenly, as though from some unexpected impact, Yenta sees everything from above. Herself, the balding top of Old Shore's head. In his struggle with her body, he has lost his cap. And this is how it is now, how it will be. Yenta sees all. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mara Faye Leatham, and I'm the translator of Irene Sola's When I Sing, Mountains Dance. The folks in town bring her green beans and zucchini to oblige her to keep on living. And she stops being a wife, and she becomes a widow, a mother. She stops being the center of her own life. She's no longer the sap and the blood because they've forced her to renounce everything she ever wanted. Here, throw them all away, all the things you've ever desired. Toss them into the road, into some ditch, the things you used to think, the things you loved. And look how paltry, how measly they were, that man and that mountain. They make a woman want a small life, a runty life, like a pretty little pebble, a life that can fit in your pocket like a ring or a hazelnut. They don't tell a woman that she can choose things that aren't small. They don't tell her that small stones get lost, that they slip through the holes in your pocket, that if they get lost, you can't choose new ones, that lost stones are lost forever. Throw out your heart, too, into the road amid the mud and the brambles. Throw out your joy. Throw out your soul and hugs and kisses and your marriage bed. You must. You must. And now get up and look at yourself on this morning, so thin and so blue, go down to the kitchen and put food inside your mouth, and put it inside the children's mouths, and inside the old man's mouth, then inside the mouths of the cows and the calves and the sow and the hens and the dog. You must, until you forget everything else with all those musts. Thank you.
Hi, I am Fadi Duda, and I'm the translator of the poetry of Maya Abul Hayat from the Arabic. My book is You Can Be the Last Leaf from Milkweed. We, yes, we who raise our flags on every occasion, mention Palestine 20 times in a sentence, afraid to laugh for too long, guilty over our fleeting small joys. We, the hunted, over our identities, our places of birth, and especially our burial lots. We, kind and wicked, heroic and obstinate, the first to die and, if necessary, the last. We, nationalists, sentimentalists, tearful, always tearful, over children we don't know who pass by us with or without sending smiles our way. Their many questions and infuriating habits. We showed our hand too soon. Our weeping over adolescents who peacefully stand in front of their houses, making gestures, playing the game of men, and our weeping over mothers, all of them, the happy ones with news of pregnancy, and those who dispatch letters to TV and radio stations. Oh, mothers who send winter clothes one size too big to their incarcerated sons. Yes, mothers who regurgitate their sorrows and mottos as stories regurgitate us. Year after year, we cry and cry until we cry no more and stop joking around. We showed our hand too soon. We know who we are.
Hello, I'm Mark Palazzati, and I'll be reading from my translation of Kibogo by Scholastique Mukasanga, published by Archipelago. As we know too well, one misfortune leads to another. And when the barns had been stripped clean, that's when Rusagayura showed up. Yes, that's when Rusagayura, the great famine, came crashing down on the poor Rwandans, on the weakened men, the emaciated women, the sickly children. That year, the long dry season seemed never to want to end. We waited for the rain, which they say is Kabogo's rain, also called Weramvura. We waited for it anxiously so we could plant the beans, peas, and sorghum. When it came, it was only to fool the farmers, for as soon as the beans and peas began to sprout, Weramvura abandoned the hillside, abandoned all of Rwanda, and an even more crushing sun returned to parch our fields. We waited for the heavy rain, the one they call Zina. She came as if in a fury, spitting hail and lightning, then immediately left, content with the devastation she had wrought. The rain of Nyamvura, too feeble, could bring no aid. Dust had buried the now arid land under a layer of red ash. Disease afflicted the potatoes and cassava that the Bazungu made us plant. The potatoes were eaten away by rot and rapacious mushrooms, tormented by ravenous flies, and the cassava turned out to be poisonous. The barns remained empty. There was nothing left to eat but banana or fern roots or wild grasses. The infants were the first to perish, their mothers having no more milk. Children with great gaping eyes ate dirt. The elderly went off to die quietly. Columns of families wandered the paths, vainly searching for scraps. Someone said, "Over there, on that hill, they've still got food." And the skeletal horde started up, and the vultures followed behind. Soon the path was lined with corpses, and those who survived found at the end of their road only empty barns and abandoned villages. And the sated vultures and hyenas didn't bother with their stacked bones.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Escoffrey, and I am the author of If I Survive You. It might be hyperbole to say I identify with my tenants, most of whom are asylum seekers and refugees, but I can empathize well enough. My parents came to the US not for economic advancement, but to escape the violence the US government funded in Jamaica throughout the 1970s as part of its war on socialism. But when I say Jamaica to non-Jamaicans, no one thinks of CIA operatives or puppet prime ministers or historical continuity. Instead, they break into free association as if they'd been tossed into a rap cipher. Bob Marley, Irie, Ganja, Poor People, Sandals, Eman. At best, they believe our history began the moment they purchased their all-inclusive vacation package. Of course, the difference between exiles and my parents, in fact, the difference between me and my parents, is that my parents have a homeland to which they can return. Just weeks before I came home from college last year, my mother said to hell with Miami, with the whole damn country, the rat race, all of it, that the bank foreclose on her house and dip back to Jamaica. She says she can finally breathe now. She feels freed by the privilege of relative racelessness. In 2009, Kingston's murder rate reached the highest ever on record, and my mom returned there so she could finally feel safe. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tess Gunty, and I'm the author of The Rabbit Hutch. I will be reading from a chapter in the beginning. The presence of free coffee at this underfunded laundromat always moves Blondine. She tries to focus on the smell of it, but a violent energy is brewing inside her. Her knees bounce uncontrollably. The laundromat is usually vacant on Mondays, but this evening another woman sits opposite Blondine, her eyes pinned to a forsaken sock on the linoleum, unblinking, unseeing. The woman's hair is the color of mouse fur. Her bangs are cut short, and she is wearing woolly knitted clothes despite the heat. 40-something. She has the posture of a question mark, a stock face, and a pair of 19th century eyeglasses. Her solitude is as prominent as the cross around her neck. You could be persuaded you'd never seen her before, even if you passed her daily. You could be persuaded you saw her every day, even if you'd never passed her before. You could ask her for directions. You could tag her with a name like Susan and a job in accounting. You'd assume that she keeps a bird feeder. She could be your neighbor. She could be your relative. She could be anyone. Frightened by the energy building inside her, Blondine resolves to talk to this woman. "Do you live in the Rabbit Hutch?" asks Blondine. "You look familiar." The woman twitches. "Yes." Her voice is like a communion wafer, tasteless, light. Blondine was never baptized, but sometimes she attends Catholic Mass and receives communion anyway. It's not like they check your ID. "What floor?" asks Blondine. "Second," replies the woman. "I'm third. What's your door?" The woman inspects Blondine as though x-raying her for sinister motives. "C2. "That's directly below ours," replies Blondine, smiling. "We're C4. "Oh," says the woman. "It's weird, right? Living so close to people you know nothing about." I'll stop there.
Hello, my name is Morgan Talty, and I am the author of Night of the Living Res. Burn. Winter, and I walked the sidewalk at night along banks of hard snow. I'd come from Rab's apartment off the reservation. Rab, this white guy with a wide mouth and eyes that closed up when he laughed, sold pot. He was all no bullshit, too. I had asked for a gram, and after he weighed it and put it in a plastic baggie and held it out to me, I reached into my pants and jacket pockets looking for the cash among the cigarette wrappers and pocket knife. And he didn't believe me as I acted the part and kept saying, "Shit, shit, shit, it must have fell out on the walk over here." He shook his head, took the weed out of the baggie and put it back into his mason jar. I ain't smoking you up, he said. And so then I said, fuck you, Rab. I really did lose the money. You'll see. Watch when I come back here in 30 minutes with the money I dropped. You'll feel stupid then. He shrugged a sorry, man, and I slammed his door shut as I left. At the bridge to the reservation, the river was still frozen, ice shining white-blue under a full moon. The sidewalk on the bridge hadn't been shoveled since the last nor'easter crap snow in November, and I walked in the boot prints everyone made who walked the walk to Overtown to get pot or catch the bus to wherever it was us Skeejans had to go, which wasn't really anywhere because everything we needed, except pot, was on the res. Well, except Best Buy or Bed and Bath and Beyond. But those natives who bought 4K Ultra DVDs or Fresh White Doilies had cars, wouldn't be taking the bus like me or Fellis did each day to the methadone clinic. That was another thing the res didn't have, a methadone clinic. But we had sacred grounds where sweats and peyote ceremonies happened once a month. Except since I had chosen to take methadone, I was ineligible to participate in native spiritual practice, according to the doc on the res. Natives damning natives. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Chan, and I'm the author of The School for Good Mothers. We have your daughter. It's the first Tuesday in September, the afternoon of her one very bad day, and Frida is trying to stay on the road. On the voicemail, the officer tells her to come to the station immediately. She pauses the message, puts down her phone. It's 2:46 p.m. She meant to get home an hour and a half ago. She pulls onto the first side street off Gray's Ferry and double parks. She calls back and begins apologizing, explaining that she lost track of time. Is she okay? The officer says the child is safe. Ma'am, we've been trying to reach you. Frida hangs up and calls Gust, has to leave a message. He needs to meet her at the station at 11th and Wharton. There's a problem. It's Harriet. Her voice catches. She repeats the officer's promise that their daughter is safe. As she begins driving again, she reminds herself to stay under the speed limit, to avoid running red lights, to breathe. All through Labor Day weekend, she felt frantic. Last Friday and Saturday, she had her usual insomnia, sleeping 2 hours each night. On Sunday, when Gus dropped off Harriet for Frida's 3.5 days of custody, Harriet was in the throes of an ear infection. That night, Frida slept 90 minutes. Last night, an hour. Harriet's crying has been relentless, too big for her body, too loud for the walls of their tiny house to absorb. Frida did what she could. She sang lullabies, rubbed Harriet's chest, gave her extra milk. She laid on the floor next to Harriet's crib, held her impossibly perfect hand to the bars, kissed her knuckles, her fingernails, feeling for the ones that needed to be trimmed, praying for Harriet's eyes to close. The afternoon sun is burning as Frida pulls up to the station, located 2 blocks from her house in an old Italian neighborhood in South Philly. She parks and rushes to the reception desk, asks if the receptionist has seen her daughter, a toddler, 18 months old, half Chinese, half white, big brown eyes, curly dark brown hair with bangs. You must be the mother, the receptionist says.
Hello, I'm Maud Newton, and I'm the author of Ancestor Trouble, A Reckoning and a Reconciliation. I look like my father, move like my father, talk like my father. When I was a child and we went places together, we were a full-size and miniature version of the same wind-up toy. Our strides clipped and jolting, brows clenched in concentration, pale legs eerily glowing in the brilliant Miami sunlight. I am unmistakably my father's daughter, but we're estranged from each other. The last time I saw him, more than a decade ago at my grandfather's funeral, he gave me a kiss. I don't expect he'll kiss me again. 1,300 miles from me, still down in South Florida, my father is going about his day, and I can imagine it. He wakes before dawn, weighs himself, goes for a walk or a jog or rides his stationary bike. He eats breakfast if the scale permits, and then he puts on a suit and drives to his law office. If he's angry about something, and he usually is, upon arriving at work, he'll pick up the phone and call around until he finds someone with the power to fix the problem. Let's hope they do that right away. Otherwise, maybe tomorrow morning, but probably this afternoon and quite possibly this very hour, he will ring them up again and start shouting. Eventually, they will do whatever my father wants, just to be free of him. I sympathize. I have loved my father, and I have feared him, and I have lain awake in the dark late at night, worrying what it means to have half his genome inside me, but I have never understood him. Sometimes I have felt that if I could just reach down far enough into myself, I would find the answers, what he wants, what he fears, what he loves. The older I get, the more I search backward, as though if I could know everyone who led to my father, who made him who he is, I would know him too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Zain Khalid. I'm the author of Brother Alive. I'll be reading from the prologue. It is night, and Imam Salim is dozing in his mosque, a little drunk. Our dark apartment is shot through by the naked heat of summer. An exhausted ceiling fan cuts the air in fifths. Something is being turned up so slowly it is hard to know what it is exactly. An exponential S in low frequency, maybe a boiler or a furnace. My senses sharpen and I am myself, a boy, sitting on the kitchen floor. At my feet, a beetle is looking at me with misery disclosed beneath exophthalmic eyes. There is a dry snapping and the sound of legs. The kitchen fills with a ruddy gas as the beetle scuttles under medical equipment, disappearing amid the tubing and beeping machines. Time unwinds and winds. Imam Salim is awake now, and I am slung over his shoulder. Sleep rents the room between my ears. I look back for the beetle to find it has become a child seated on the counter, his legs swaying like two metronomes nudged one after the other. And like me, the child is slender, her sweet, feminine, and unwise. He is not solid. He is either living silver or spun glass. Though just a few hours my senior, he already expects disappointment. When we acquire language, we are each other's first word. Thank you.
I'm Wahini Vara, and I'm the author of The Immortal King Rao. One morning at the age of 7, I awoke to the sound of King calling out from the kitchen, "Rise and shine, little Puffin." Puffin was a nickname, one of several he used when I was small. But when he said it, pulling me out of sleep, I had what I can best describe as a vision. In my mind, I could see 3 black and white birds with orange beaks standing in a circle on a snow-spotted boulder, their pot-bellied stomachs thrust forward as if they were businessmen at a conference. The scene was as vivid as if it were real, but to call it a hallucination wouldn't be right. I was looking in my mind's eye at actual puffins that had conferenced on an actual boulder. The image in front of me was from the website of the Audubon Society. I was aware of this, of the source, because the experience wasn't only perceptual, it also contained information. I suddenly knew, for example, that in Iceland, people used to catch puffins with a net attached to a pole, a practice known as sky fishing. For some time, restaurants in some parts of the world served customers the fresh hearts of puffins. The word itself, puffin, is believed to come from the impression the birds gave, with their bloated little cheeks, of having just inhaled. The scientific name, Fratercula arctica, means little brother of the north, perhaps because of the bird's black and white plumage. Perhaps because the bird's black and white plumage resembled a friar's robes, or else because they sometimes held their feet together when leaping into the water in a manner that suggested hands pressed in prayer. But puffins no longer existed. Their habitat had melted and they'd gone extinct. It's strange to try to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it, but all of this emerged in my mind, almost as if I were reading about it or watching a movie. King was calling to me again, issuing the cheerful morning commands I was used to. "Pee," he called, "wash your hands." I called out for him. He must have heard the urgency in my voice, because he arrived at the open door quickly. I tried to explain what had happened, the nickname he had used, Puffin, the vision it had brought on. The fact that the vision came along with information, as if I were looking up Puffin online. At this last part, there appeared a look on his face, bright-eyed and intense, of recognition. He sat on the edge of my bed. "Baby love, the human brain is capable of so much," he began, putting his soft and spotted hand on mine. "It's a miracle, isn't it?" The morning sunlight filtered beautifully through the trees and into the windows on that morning of my transformation. Twining his fingers with mine, he said, "I know what's happening."
Hi, I'm Jasmina Barrera. I'm the author of Línea Negra. I'm going to read a passage in Spanish and then Cristina Maxwini, the translator, will read the passage in English. Ayer nos decían en el curso de preparto que las hembras de los mamíferos suelen entrar en trabajo de parto en la noche porque hay menos depredadores. Las pupilas se dilatan durante el parto y por eso también es mejor estar con las luces bajas. En México se acostumbra, cuando un bebé nace en la casa, cerrar las puertas y ventanas para que no entren los malos espíritus, tener la casa a oscuras. En español se dice dar a luz, pero los partos tienen más de noche que de día. Incluso cuando suceden de día, son una especie de eclipse, de noche durante el día. En mi panza se ha ido dibujando lentamente una línea oscura. Línea negra la llaman. Dicen que es para que el bebé, que ve en alto contraste, suba por el estómago y sepa encontrar los pezones. Mi cuerpo se va llenando de señales para alguien más. Señales que tienen que explicarme, porque yo misma no sé descifrarlas. Gracias.
Hello, my name is Cristina Maxwini, and I'm the translator of Línea Negra by Jasmina Barrera. Thank you, Jasmina. Yesterday at the birthing class, we were told that female mammals usually go into labour at night because there are fewer predators around at that time. The pupils dilate during childbirth, so it's better to have the lights dimmed. In Mexico, during a home birth, it's customary to close the doors and windows so evil spirits can't get in. The house is kept in darkness. The process of bringing a child into the world is called dar a luz in Spanish, giving to light. But there's more of night than day about it all. Even when the birth happens during daylight hours, it's like a sort of eclipse, darkness in the day. A dark line has gradually been appearing on my abdomen. It's called the Línea Negra. Apparently, as babies see in high contrast, it enables them to move up the stomach and find the nipples. My body is being covered in signs for someone else, signs that have to be explained to me since I don't know how to decipher them.
My name is Ingrid Rojas Contreras, and I am the author of The Man Who Could Move Clouds. I will be reading from a chapter in the middle. My ears replayed the crack which my own head made as it hit the pavement. I imagined my brain, pink and coiled, pitching forward in fluid. I brought my hands to my head and pressed as if I could stop the brain from hitting the cranium. When I broke my eyes open, there was a man in glasses pulling me to my feet. I saw a bike mangled on the ground and his car door open, mangled as well. I understood this is how I had ended up on the ground. The man asked if I was okay. He touched, then kept his hand at the small of my waist. I brushed his hand away. I am fine. I am going to ride away now. At the intersection, I got off my bike and stared, mesmerized, at the street signs, Madison, Halsted, because not only did I not recognize the names, it suddenly dawned on me. I had no idea where I came from or where I was going, what city I was in, what my name was, and I did not even know the year. Somewhere, somehow, this struck me as funny, nay, hilarious. Was I laughing out loud? I half reached to stop someone, to ask them the year, and if they didn't freak out, maybe the city. But I pulled back in a giggle, thinking, this is life imitating. I did not know how the rest of that sentence went. Then the man I recognized as the one who had flung his car door in front of me passed me by, whistling in his coat and hat, walking a small white poodle. Then a sentence popped into my head the way words sometimes do of their own volition, just pop into your mind. All good science fiction begins this way. It's a story where it was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't focus because I was raging with electricity. I was air packed together in sheer consciousness. I closed my eyes. I gave in to the current. I exulted in the corner. There was the noise of traffic, the bustling of people. I was euphoria standing in place.
Hi, I'm Hua Su. I'm the author of Stay True. There was a time when fragments would come spilling out of me a few sips into the first beer. The fact that this specific bottle I had chosen, Newcastle Brown Ale, reminded me of him. The fact that I was drinking it all. The fact that I had a tendency to disappear, to take friendship too seriously sometimes, or not seriously at all most of the time. That my mood depended on the proximity to summertime, the feeling of the afternoon sun, the sound of a distant melody coming from a stranger's window. That this is why I still smoked, because I admired the way that smoke evaporated into the air, aimless and ephemeral. The fact that in those early years, when our faces hadn't yet changed, I could picture Ken turning 21, sitting in a lecture hall, graduating from college with a sensible haircut, living in Boston, enrolled in law school, selling concessions at Fenway Park, as one of his many dreams used to go. The fact that I was a writer at all, a way to loot and hoard in a city on fire, to impose structure on chaos, to download the contents of a storage drive before it succumbed to corruption. Songs, notable t-shirts, and quotations from friends written in the margins of my books. Taking a bar napkin to scribble down words, the dutiful surviving half of an inside joke. I would tell you all this because it was my way of coping, telling stories, of thinking that stories could build a bridge over an abyss. Maybe it was legacy, a way of bringing Ken into this moment, a spirit made real in the clink of two bottles, the magical appearance of a sad song in the air. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dorda Norse. I'm the author of A Line in the World, A Year on the North Sea Coast. My family was tied to the place we lived, but beyond that, we were oriented west. That was where our kin came from. The coastline was our place of origin. My family has had a little house tucked away in a deserted backwater out there all my life. And when on warm days we itched for a quick trip to the beach, we drove plumb west. This was the fastest way to the sea, driving in a straight line until we hit Dilla Sud Dune. Then we walked across the sand, laden with blankets, thermos flasks, and cool boxes. It was there one day when I was 11 that I was nearly dragged out to sea by a wave. I was holding my mother's hand. It was August. In those days, I wasn't familiar with the currents and I didn't appreciate their strength. But as we walked along the beach, letting the waves splash around our ankles, one of them dragged me out. My mother grabbed my leg and we both skidded on the shingle until they let us go. Afterwards, we sat and cried a bit, grazes on our legs, blood. My mother was clutching my hand and wouldn't let go. Since then, I've called them Valkyrie waves, the kind that rove in from the North Sea in long, elegant swells and otherwise mild days. They'll take you to sea if they can. I'm afraid of them. And every time I see them, I remember love. Thank you.
Come Back in September, a literary education on West 67th Street, Manhattan. And Daryl Pinckney. I made Elizabeth Hardwick laugh when I applied late to get into her creative writing class at Barnard College in the autumn of 1973. Not only could I, a Black guy from Columbia across the street, rattle off a couple of middle period Sylvia Plath poems when she asked me what I was reading, Black Lake, Black Boat, Two Black Cut Paper People. I told her that my roommate said we would kidnap her daughter, Harriet, if she didn't let me into the class. His sister was her daughter's best friend. I met her at a party of his Dalton School friends. I was in. Where do the black trees go that drink here? Their shadows must cover Canada. I walked her to the subway at 116th Street and Broadway. Plath had come around once for her husband's class when they lived in Boston. Professor Hardwick remembered her as almost docile, nothing like the poems that would make her famous. Professor Hardwick was fresh and put together. Her soft appearance made the tough things she said even funnier. In her walk, she rocked gently from side to side. She was on the job, in a short black leather coat and green print scarf, carrying a stiff leather satchel with short handles just wide enough for a certain number of student manuscripts. I hadn't yet seen her bound up from a chair and break free, flinging over her silk shoulder a silver evening bag on its chain, saying to an astonished table of graduate students and free spirits who just agreed among themselves that poetry was everything, "I'm sure you're very nice, but I can't bear that kind of talk," and then dancing away from their party because she'd rather be at home looking forward to Saturday night delivery of the Sunday New York Times. At our first official student-teacher conference in dingy Barnard Hall, I made Professor Harvick laugh again because I recited the last paragraph of Lillian Hellman's memoir, An Unfinished Woman. "That fraud," Professor Harvick said. "She tried to do everything but have me killed." 6 years earlier, there had been a Mike Nichols revival of Hellman's play, The Little Foxes at Lincoln Center, and she, Hardwick, had reviewed it for the New York Review of Books, calling it awkward, didactic, and full of cliché. She didn't believe in the South as an idea, she said. Her use of Black people, she said, "You would die." Agrarianism was a bore. Had I read Alan Tate, a poet I'd never heard of? "You don't need him." Faulkner, the bear, "You do need him, but don't ever do that again." Excuse me? Read Lillian. People were cutting me on the street. She got people to write letters. She told them, "I'm not used to being attacked by someone who's been a guest in my house." I made up my mind that I didn't care if I never went to another dinner party at Lillian's. Dashiell Hammett was always trying to get away from her. For Patricia Neal. I was discovering so much: Rimbaud, Frank O'Hara, Baldwin's essays, Gertrude Stein's autobiography. Every day from hour to hour, there was something new, a name to put on my list of names to reckon with. One afternoon, I walked by an open door and a guy with long blonde hair was at his upright preparing to play. The music had poignance and a couple of other people also paused. My mother loved the piano, but I'd never heard of Eric Satie. Friends and professors had a lot to tell me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beverly Gage. I'm the author of G-Man, J. Edgar Hoover and the Making of the American Century. This is the preface to part 3. The last time the presidency changed hands in 1933, Hoover had been a nobody, a middle-aged, mid-level Republican appointee sweating over how to keep his job. 12 years later, at the dawn of Harry Truman's tenure, he was household name and a global celebrity, better recognized and more celebrated than the new president himself. Over the course of Roosevelt's 3+ terms in office, Hoover had acquired powers unimaginable during his early days under Harlan Stone, the rights not only to arm his agents in pursuit of kidnappers and gangsters, but to conduct political surveillance and intelligence investigations throughout half the world. In 1933, there had been no such thing as a G-Man. By 1945, the G-Man was a universally recognized type, born, bred, and popularized in Hoover's image. Hoover himself had changed during those years. When Roosevelt came to office, Hoover had been living at home with his mother, a dutiful, if parochial son of small city Washington. By 1945, he could walk into the finest nightclubs in New York or Los Angeles or Chicago and be guaranteed a table. He had traveled the country, taking in its vistas, its hodgepodge of people, the salty pleasures of beach and ocean, and he had entertained senators and movie stars and impresarios, the creme de la creme. He had seen pain and sorrow, too, the anguish of a kidnap victim's family, the quieter loss of a sick and elderly parent. More than a dozen agents had died in his employ, 10 from gunshot wounds, 2 in a plane crash, at least 1 from suicide. He shared all these experiences with a man who had first caught his attention as a charming young fraternity sort, but who had since matured into a steadfast life partner.
My name is Carrie Greenidge. My book is The Grimke's, The Legacy of Slavery in an American Family. As a terrible heat wave spread across New England in July 1911, a Federal Express train snaked its way up the Atlantic coast on the New York, New Haven, and Hartford line. It left Union Station in Washington, D.C., bound for Boston, where the heat was so oppressive that wilted citizens slept in the city's common between Tremont and Beacon Streets, and anxious mothers stayed up all night walking their infants up and down tenement sidewalks, strewn with mattresses and pillows. They were afraid, they said, that their babies would fall asleep, overheat, and not wake up with the sunrise. Temperatures in Hartford, Connecticut were so high in the 90s after midnight that one man, driven mad by the sweat and unrelenting mugginess, scaled a utility pole, and authorities prodded him down with brooms and sticks. With the train barreling toward Connecticut, over 1 hour behind schedule, Angelina Weld Grimke tried anything she could to keep cool in the Pullman car. She wore only a light kimono and slept bare on her mattress, arms dangling through the narrow window so that the breeze from the passing countryside could counteract the sweat pouring from every surface of her body. She had taken the trip from the District of Columbia to Boston countless times before. Although she lived and taught in the district, she spent summers and most holidays gallivanting around the New England countryside, where she had spent most of her adolescence. She usually read or wrote letters to friends on the train, but the heat was so suffocating that she found herself unable to do anything more than look languidly out the window. As the train approached Bridport, Connecticut, a loud crash and the sound of screeching brakes jolted her awake. People screamed and glass shattered while her Pullman car jumped the tracks and lurched down a 20-foot embankment. 12 people died and 44 were wounded. Angelina Weld Grimke was one of the luckier ones. Even though her back was broken and her luggage lost, all of her clothes, money, and personal papers muddled with the rest of the debris at the bottom of the Bridgeport embankment. Her long recovery would begin at the local hospital. Some of the dead had been so badly mutilated that it took weeks for the family members to identify their remains.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Homans, and I'm the author of Mr. B, George Balanchine's 20th Century. During the War and Revolution, Balanchine saw the violent breakdown of the Imperial Russian court, with its hierarchical life of rules and manners, which had been ballet and the body's mainstay. He saw broken bodies and gruesome death, the human form destroyed. But he also saw movement and speed, the motor car, steam trains, airplanes, factories, movies, and above all, motion, more motion than ever before in human life. He started over, building with the sticks and bones of the old ruined art, and with everything he picked up as he went along, and he picked up a lot. It mattered that he had not started with the image of the harmonious classical body. The war had killed that. He was starting with the broken body, and over the years he found a way to make this body whole, but it was a different whole from the balanced imperial form. It was impossible to go back. The Balanchine body moved in one organic piece, head to toe, and it could bend, contort, and even break without losing its beauty or form. It could be grotesque and tangled or out of joint or harmonized across multiple spatial planes. But whatever the style, this body had no clear axis, no tonal center. Its foundation stone, worse, its default, was chaos. The physical home, the positions of balance and return, had to be made and remade at every moment. Stability and perfection were death and had to be fought with sheer energy and a will to life, sent coursing through flesh in dynamic opposites that might, just might, hold. His dancers didn't stop, didn't pose, kept moving. To dance in a body, in that body, was to know that you were on the edge and it might all give way. Holding it together was a complicated physics of energy, but also of anxiety. No dancer was alike, just as no human was alike, and he changed his dances all the time, tailored them to each individual. Thank you.
So, hi, my name is Rachel Wiseman.
And my name is Claire McCool.
And we're the authors of Metaphysical Animals, How Four Women Brought Philosophy Back to Life.
Mary continued to visit Iris in Oxford, turning up at St. Anne's for tea. On one such visit towards the end of 1952, she found herself in a bookshop facing a sea of purple spines and a queue of students snatching them off the shelves. R.M. Hare's The Language of Morals was a great hit. The thought of a new generation fed on Hare's moral subjectivism left Mary feeling thoroughly depressed. But she was on the hunt for a book of quite a different colour, King Solomon's Ring, by the Austrian ethologist Konrad Lorenz.
Before reading it, Mary had not noticed the way that the strange concept animal grouped creatures as different as fleas and gorillas, dogs and octopi into one abstract collective, simply so they could be contrasted with humans. Now, animals seem to marry an absurd tool invented simply to protect a mistaken idea of human dignity, the idea that we're not like the beasts. Yet, humans, Mary realized, do belong to the class of animals, are among the beasts of the earth, and snails are as distinct from snow leopards as humans are from humpbacked whales. And with that flashing insight, the background to Mary's thought shifted. Her concepts rearranged themselves, and thought began to flow. Thanks.
I'm Aaron Sachs. My book is Up from the Depths, Herman Melville, Lewis Mumford, and Rediscovery in Dark Times. I'm going to read from the beginning of chapter 15, which is called Reconnaissance, 1899 to 1925. Mumford started taking walks through New York City in 1899, the year he turned 4. He was guided by his German grandfather, a former head waiter at Delmonico's, who introduced Lewis not only to the city's great parks and museums and libraries, but also to friends who ran bookbinderies and sold cigars and made boots, workers in the industrial economy who retained a high regard for craft and durability. After Mumford had become a grandfather himself, he recalled that almost all of these men prided themselves not on accumulation, but, as he said, on their being fortunate enough to retire in middle life on a competency, as they called it, enough to enable them to enjoy their leisure and their good health before their bodies became enfeebled. Enough is plenty, was a saying I can remember from my youth before this became a heresy against the American way of life. In time, sufficiency became one of Mumford's guiding principles, and the urban survey, or reconnaissance, as he often called it, became both his fundamental research method and a way of coping with his sense of trauma. Cities, he thought, for all their drawbacks, should have everything a person needed, from the fresh air of a wooded path to the buzz of a community hall. Always on foot, he reconnoitered urban spaces to find out what he was up against and to establish connections, to work his body and mind in ways that wove them into the fabric of his environment and that allowed that environment to become imprinted on his soul.
Hello, my name is Margot Jefferson, and I'm the author of Constructing a Nervous System. I stood in a bright, harsh light. The stage was bare. I extended my arm, clung, hurled it out, pointed an accusatory finger, then turned to an unseen audience and declared, "This is the woman with only one childhood." It was part of the night's dream work. And I was rattled when I woke up, for I'd been addressing myself. My tone was harsh, and my outstretched arm with its accusing finger had the force of that moment in melodrama when the villain, hitherto successful in his scheme to ruin the heroine, is revealed, condemned, and readied for punishment. I understood what I had to do. At the end of his stage shows, Bill Bojangles Robinson would look up at the lighting booth and shout, "Give me a light, my color." Pause, then blackout. When the light returned, I knew it was time to construct another nervous system. You write criticism, you write memoir. What will be your tactics, strategies, instruments for constructing this nervous system? I keep carping and fussing, rearing up against the words critic and criticism, such august, temperate words. When you're thrilled by a taffeta petticoat, a flying buttress, a sound chamber of notes and syllables, when an idea makes you feel as if the top of your head were being taken off, Then abandon your two temperate prose zones and keep writing criticism. As for memoir, I keep attaching adjectives to it. Cultural memoir, temperamental memoir. What makes me so anxious? I want memoir and criticism to merge. Can they? And if so, how? Read on.
Hi, I'm Peter Brooks. I'm the author of Seduced by Story, The Use and Abuse of Narrative. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a story. Nothing can stop it, nothing can defeat it. Thus spoke Tyrion in the final episode of Game of Thrones, claiming the throne for Bran the Broken. Many viewers like neither the choice of king nor rationale, but the claim that story brings you to world dominance seems now so banal that it's common wisdom. Narrative seems to have become accepted as the one and only form of knowledge and speech that regulates human affairs. For myself, the moment I knew narrative had taken over the world came with President George W. Bush's presentation of his cabinet in 2000. Said Bush of his appointees, each person has got their own story that's so unique, stories that really explain what America can and should be about. And more simply, in presenting Secretary of State Powell, a great American story, and simpler still in presenting Transportation Secretary Mineta, I love his story. One had the impression that Bush's understanding of reality was wholly narrative. No other form of speech or cognitive faculty came close. Bush gave dramatic confirmation of the notion that narrative is the crucial tool in the toolkit we use to construct our knowledge of the world and our sense of self. This left me pensive and not a little confused. It was as if a fledgling I had nourished had become a predator devouring reality in the name of story. Since the early 1970s, I had been arguing and teaching that narrative is in fact key to our understanding of self and surround, that we live in and by what psychologist Jerome Bruner later labeled the narrative construction of reality. But I never envisioned nor hoped for the kind of narrative takeover of reality that we appear to be witnessing in the early 21st century, where even public civic discourse supposedly dedicated to reasoned analysis seems to have been taken hostage. This narrative takeover, what it means, how to think about it, and how to provide a more intelligent account of what narrative is and does, motivates me here. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Alia Trabuco Ceran, and I'm the author of this book, When Women Kill, 4 Crimes Retold, translated into English by Sophie Hughes. I'll be reading a bit from the prologue. The title is Outside the Law. Women who kill, I reply, time and again when people ask me what my book is about. I'm researching cases of women who kill. And each time, as if part of a script, the same scene plays out in front of me. Men and women alike furrow their brows, wince, and then nod their heads in approval of my decision to tackle such a pressing, awful, and all too common problem in Latin America. It's my turn, the moment when I must correct their mistake, word by word, and watch as their understanding becomes disapproval and suspicion. Where they should have heard the words women killers, a strange mental lapse made them hear the opposite, women who have been killed. Once I got over my surprise at this repeated misunderstanding, it actually helped me to realize something fundamental. It's easier for people to imagine a dead woman than a woman prepared to kill. And it didn't matter if I said murderous women or violent women. By the same slip, more cultural than auditory, the disturbing image of an armed woman was superseded by another, inoffensive one, that of a defenseless woman, 6 feet under, herself murdered or the victim of violence. Women and killer were true antonyms, it seemed, words that, when spoken together, proved unhearable, unthinkable, either causing selective deafness or conjuring the most terrifying flights of fancy, witches, Medea, vampires, femmes fatales. Incidentally, this mental slip doesn't happen when we mention men who kill. The invisible gender laws operate covertly and constantly, guiding the script of violence towards the same ending. When a man kills, he does not cast doubt on his masculinity, irrespective of his motives or victims, his weapons or circumstances. For a man, the possibility of his violent act is always in the air and even helps confirm his status as a real man. A woman who kills, on the other hand, is twice outside the law, outside both the codified laws and the cultural laws that define and regulate femininity. And it is this double transgression, this twofold rebellion, that triggers that telling slip of the ear. Writing this book, reassessing these emblematic cases of female killers would mean precisely retraining that ear. Only then can reverberations of their gunshots be heard.
Hello, my name is Timothy Bewes, and I'm the author of Free Indirect, the novel in a post-fictional age. There may be no more fundamental question in literary studies than what a work means, whose thought it is voicing, what it is really saying. But this question has a special significance in the literature of our era. Indeed, there is no period in which the question of thought comes more directly into focus as a problem, and none in which it is more difficult to address. How then can the thought of the work become the object of a critical study? In the argument of this book, deflections, refusals, failures, and incapacities are as important to the story of the novel's thought as insights, revelations, and intuitions. For there is a thought in the contemporary novel that eludes established critical approaches. Such approaches assume that there is a subject of the work, a thinking entity who is responsible for it, and whom the reading may be supposed to reconstruct. They assume the presence of an expressive element and a form in which that element is embodied, which is in turn legible. Such assumptions are important to my work, but precisely as a limit beyond which I am seeking to ground the novel as a mode of thought. For the thought I call free indirect is not localizable in a character or narrator. It does not take the form of speaking, seeing, or knowing, and its content is not graspable as an object. Whereas novel criticism has been defined by efforts to forge interpretive links between the content of the work and the world, and whereas novel theory proposes theoretical explanations, what the novel of our time does unceasingly in works by writers such as J.M. Coetzee, Teju Cole, Rachel Cusk, Valeria Luiselli, Zadie Smith, is effect the dissolution of such links. A 21st century theory of the novel must do justice to the literature of our period, a literature that not only refuses to find connections, but that dwells in a space of disconnection between the work and the world.
Hi, I'm Rachel Aviv, and I'm the author of Strangers to Ourselves, Unsettled Minds and the Stories That Make Us. In the first weeks of first grade, I made a friend named Elizabeth. She was the oldest child in our class, but tiny with thin, knobby limbs. We connected over the game Mancala, dropping marbles into a wooden board with 14 shallow holes. I avoided other classmates so I'd be ready when Elizabeth asked me to play. Somehow she always did. I felt that I had willed our friendship into being. I asked my mom why Elizabeth's house in Bloomfield Hills, a wealthy suburb of Detroit, smelled so different from ours. I was disappointed that her answer, laundry detergent, felt so ordinary. Elizabeth's house was so large that I was sure she got lost in it. She had a yellow canopy bed, a walk-in closet, a swimming pool. She showed me how, when she brushed her blonde hair, it got even lighter. Her family had a refrigerator in their basement devoted just to sodas, and one day Elizabeth proposed that we feed Coke to our knees. We tried the experiment in her babysitter's car and laughed as Coke dripped onto the seats. It seemed incredible that there was only one way to drink. At home, I sometimes pretended I was Elizabeth. I walked into rooms and imagined I didn't know where they led. It seemed like a fluke, a bit of bad luck, that I had been born as me rather than as Elizabeth. I remember waking up forlorn after a dream. I was given the chance to become Elizabeth if I picked the right seat on the school bus. I walked past 13 rows, overwhelmed by the opportunity, and chose the wrong seat.
Hello, my name is Musab Butoha, and I'm the author of Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear. An excerpt from Palestine AZ. A. An apple that fell from the table on a dark evening when man-made lightning flashed through the kitchen, the streets, and the sky, rattling the cupboards and breaking the dishes. Am is the linking verb that follows I in the present tense, when I am no longer present, when I am shattered. P, a book that doesn't mention my language or my country and has maps of every place except for my birthplace, as if I were an illegitimate child on Mother Earth. Borders are those invented lines drawn with ash on maps and sewn into the ground by bullets. Things you may find hidden in my ear. 1. When you open my ear, touch it gently. My mother's voice lingers somewhere inside. Her voice is the echo that helps me recover equilibrium when I feel dizzy during my attentiveness. You may encounter songs in Arabic, poems in English I recite to myself, or a song I chant to the chirping birds in our backyard. When you stitch the cut, don't forget to put all these back in my ear. Put them back in order, as you would do with the books on your shelf. 2. The drone's buzzing sound, the roar of an F-16, the screams of bombs falling on houses, on fields, and on bodies, of rockets flying away. Rid my tiny ear canal of them all. Spray the perfume of your smiles on the incision. Inject the song of life into my veins to wake me up. Gently beat the drum, so my mind may dance with yours, my doctor, day and night.
Hi, my name is Paul Lavasabayos, and I'm going to read from Banana. This poem, Nogales entry, Elegy for Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez, has, like the rest of the book, some reported speech, 3 pieces of reported speech, one from gunbroker.com, one from Oxford English Dictionary, and lastly, from the testimony of the accused shooter via the Tucson Sentinel. 1, salary, sal, re, sol, salt, a salt wage, assault rifles for sale online, real Border Patrol rifles used in action, wages for sale for real assault, real sales waged for salt. 2, a border agent has agency, noun, plural, border agents, as in, boards of agents will border agents. Agent, a person who acts on behalf of, a person who acts on behalf of, to behalf of. 3, the boy's hands appeared to hold rocks. Appeared, not appear. Up here are no rocks to hold. Hold up, hands appear, hands. Hold the boy up.
My name is Cynthia Cruz, and I'm the author of Hotel Oblivion. And I'm going to read 2 poems from this collection. The first one is called Refrain. Refrain. I ride the S-Bahn out to wedding and don't go to class again. At the salon there, I dye my hair chestnut brown like Liz Spector or Maria Schneider in The Passenger. Then I leave my clothes and everything I own. It is death and its needle I am thinking of. Bachmann or Franza in Egypt and her escape from her husband, his fascism, and the sanatorium he forced her into. My father, when I was 15, was sent into the desert. He went missing, and I didn't think I would ever see him again. When he came back, he was not the same man. Changing, the poems are becoming letters or songs, and making them is all that I do. That and the endless photographs. And I'm trying not to want to be someone else or myself, but better, which is, in a sense, a kind of death drive, a death wish. The body and language and their eventual collision is what I am banking on. The children here in Berlin, where I am, their eyes are wild, and when they run, their bodies are young and not yet owned by anyone. Okay. And the other poem I'm going to read is Hotel Letter. Hotel Letter. Chanel creams and training plans for marathons. Fluoridex and magnesium. Piles of glass bottles of nail polish and a silver cosmetics case of unused Tom Ford makeup. When I woke this morning, I could sense the beginning of the end. 3 months in the black flame of the desert, and still they could not cure my father. You learn to live with it, I wrote once in a letter. Black and white photographs of Mexicans in the locked archives of the Ethnological Museum in Berlin, and still they cannot stop asking me where the mysterious illness derives from. It finally hit me, and now I've taken to smoking cigarettes and riding the U-Bahn to its end. Mother's Folklingen childhood, its brilliant nebula and yellowing opulence of iron mill, like Adament's Polaroids in which he documents each object he owns, their milken and gaseous auras. Sabina says honesty is the only antidote for shame. She's trying to save me, but I'm tired. And besides, I'm telling you everything.
Hello, I'm David Hernandez, and I'll be reading from my collection, Hello, I Must Be Going. This poem is called History Kids. These kids in tents, white tents in camps in Texas. These brown kids who trekked miles with parents, deserts and mountain passes with parents, days of scorch and nights with parents with flashlights, stars with mama's voice soothing kids with moon blue skin, with closed eyelids and dreaming, with high noon shadows and humming, the land sliding into hand-me-down shoes, laceless, rubber soles worn thin. These kids now in chain link pens, trapped in, wrapped in thermal blankets, in synthetic shine, flashing together like stars, the ones you don't see, hidden by distance, by degrees below horizon, by these government tents, these canopies of white. In pictures, they blur their faces, they vanish anguished eyes we see anyway we imagine, which shade of earth, which hue of helpless, specks of gold or green like mica in stone. Oh, America, your own kids shimmer this summer, this season of turning hydrants to fountains, mailboxes to scrap metal, thanks to fireworks, waxy vines on kitchen walls, thanks to crayons, thanks to kids. But that's how they are, that's what they do. They're just kids, they're just kids. Thank you.
The lobelias of fear. There are maple trees, 1, 2, 3, but wait, there's 5 more, 2 behind the bungalow and lots in the Poetry State Forest. I hear target practice from far away is probably for shooting deer, bears, and dinosaurs, but how will we, still alive, socialize in the winter? wrapped in bear skins, will sit around pot-bellied stoves eating the lobelias of fear left over from desperation. Last summer's woodland sunflowers and bee balm remind us of black cherry eaten in a hurry while the yard grows in the moonlight, shrinking like a salary or a damaged item when we return in the morning for a breakfast of harvest petunias sprinkled with wild marshmallow.
Hello, my name is Isaac Butler. I'm the author of The Method, How the 20th Century Learned to Act. I'm going to read for you a little bit about the very first performance of Clifford Odets's Waiting for Lefty. Waiting for Lefty premiered at Civic Rep on January 6th, 1935. It was, from the first scene, a quiver of thunderbolts shot one by one at the crowd. Here was real life, the life of the working class, given dramatic form and urgency and a kind of grace by Odets's marvelous ear. The audience laughed, they cheered, they leaned forward in their seats. Audience and actors had become one, Harold Clurman recalled. Line after line brought applause, whistles, bravos, and heartfelt shouts of kinship. And then something remarkable happened. As Agate Keller, played by Joe Bromberg, shouted, "Hello, America, hello. We're storm birds of the working class, workers of the world, our bones and blood." An energy started to build within the crowd. And when he asked, "Well, what's the answer?" a few plants in the audience shouted, "Strike." And the rest of the audience shouted right along with them, "Strike, strike, 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 strike." The audience leapt to its feet, applauding, screaming, nearly delirious. Out of their throats came what Clurman would later call the birth cry of the 30s. Our youth had found its voice. Waiting for Lefty was a call to action, a play that believed that the struggle for a better world was worth dedicating your life to, worth dying for. And the audience in the theater wholeheartedly agreed. "I was terrified the balcony was going to fall in," actor Ruth Nelson said. "I remember the sense of wood in the theater, the sound of wood. We lined up at the curtain with Clifford because he, of course, played a role in it. And the curtain went up and down and up and down, and every one of us was crying like a baby." The audience, too bewitched to go home, hung around talking. A few wandered the stage, spellbound by what they'd seen. And the actors? "We couldn't sleep that night," Aaliyah Kazan recalled. "We straggled north through the silent streets, Harold Clurman among us, and found a child's that was open all night, and lingered over our suppers, not talking too much, stunned by what had just occurred. None of us was ever to be the same again, and I suppose we all knew it." Thank you.
My name is Kelly Lytle Hernandez, and I'm the author of Bad Mexicans, Race, Empire, and Revolution in the Borderlands. When Ricardo Flores Magón took the stage at the Teatro de la Paz, he likely wore bohemian garb, a baggy black suit with a crisp white dress shirt and a wide black tie. A mop of curly black hair flopped atop his chubby brown face, defined only by his dark, swollen, darting eyes. Confident, he projected his voice at the end of his speech, speaking aloud an idea that shot up to the rafters and shocked the nation's reformers. "The Diaz administration is a den of thieves," he bellowed. Stunned, the attendees hissed. The nation's clearest voices for reform, Juana Belén Gutiérrez de Mendoza, Juan Sarabia, Lázaro Gutiérrez de Lara, Camilo Arriaga, and others, had all questioned this or that aspect of the Diaz regime, the mine owners, the crooked judges, the jefatura. But no one had disparaged the president's rule outright, and no one had questioned the legitimacy of his reign. To do so was a crime. The hissing grew louder, rushing from the rafters down to the stage as if to stuff the words back into Flores Magón's mouth. But it was done. Before anyone could fully imagine what those words would ultimately reap, he repeated the charge. "The Diaz administration is a den of thieves." They knew what he meant. Porfirio Diaz was a thief of land, a thief of wages, a thief of life, a thief of democracy. Flores Magón met their caution by bellowing for a third time. "The The Diaz administration is a den of thieves. A few eyes peeked above the fog of caution. Then the theater broke into stomping and applause. Sitting on stage, watching the commotion, Camilo Arriaga looked out at the audience and wondered, where was this man taking us? But he already knew. Ricardo Flores Magón had torn the veil of legitimacy covering Diaz's long, harsh rule. And there would be no looking away, no turning back. Mexico was on the road to revolution.
Hello, I'm Joseph Osmundson, the author of Virology, Essays for the Living, the Dead, and the Small Things in Between. And I'll be reading from a journal entry from September 8th, 2020, when I had to go back to teaching in person. What are your risks right now? My therapist, Dr. Eric, asked me. None, I say to myself, none. I'm just at home and I'm writing. Maybe I see now this is why I'm writing so much. When it's just me and this empty page, I can conjure a virus without being susceptible to it. The virus becomes a thing out there and my in here becomes safe. So praise be to writing, something I can do alone. Something I can do alone, but with the world, amen. Blessed be this writing. I don't know who it will save, but it has already saved me. Sing to heaven of this writing. It is here that I feel completely safe. Consider the worlds thy hands have made. This page is the only world I can control. Oh, my soul, praise the banal joy of a meeting of human bodies, and let us leave it unscathed, amen. Tune my heart to sing. 4 mouths and 8 lungs, keep us all safe, our mouths, our lungs, our hearts, oh here. Oh words, let my lungs fill up with air, let you words be expelled and breathed in through the dangerous air, and let us all wake tomorrow alive, but more than alive, alive and well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ed Yong, and I'm reading from An Immense World, How Animal Senses Reveal the Hidden Realms Around Us. This is from the introductory chapter. Earth teems with sights and textures, sounds and vibrations, smells and tastes, electric and magnetic fields. But every animal can only tap into a small fraction of reality's fullness. Each is enclosed within its own sensory bubble, perceiving but a tiny sliver of an immense world. There is a wonderful word for this sensory bubble, Umwelt. It was defined and popularized by the zoologist Jakob von Uexküll in 1909. Umwelt comes from the German word for environment, but Uexküll didn't use it simply to refer to an animal's physical surroundings. Instead, an Umwelt is specifically the part of those surroundings that an animal can sense and experience, its perceptual world. A multitude of creatures could be standing in the same physical space and have completely different Umwelten. A tick, questing for mammalian blood, cares about body heat, the touch of hair, and the odor of butyric acid that emanates from skin. These 3 things constitute its Umwelt. Trees of green, red roses too, skies of blue and clouds of white, these are not part of its wonderful world. The tick doesn't willfully ignore them, it simply cannot sense them and doesn't know that they exist. This was a radical notion at the time, and in some circles it might still be. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Uexküll saw animals not as mere machines, but as sentient entities, whose inner worlds not only existed, but were worth contemplating. He didn't exalt the inner worlds of humans over those of other species. Rather, he treated the Umwelt concept as a unifying and leveling force. Our Umwelt might be bigger than the tick's, but it is still limited. It just doesn't feel that way. To us, it feels all-encompassing. It is all that we know, and so we easily mistake it for all there is to know. But this is an illusion, and it is one that every animal shares. We cannot sense the faint electric fields that sharks and platypuses can. We are not privy to the magnetic fields that robins and sea turtles detect. We can't trace the invisible trail of a swimming fish the way a seal can. We can't feel the air currents created by a buzzing fly the way a wandering spider does. Our ears cannot hear the ultrasonic calls of rodents and hummingbirds or the infrasonic calls of elephants and whales. Our eyes cannot see the infrared radiation that rattlesnakes detect or the ultraviolet light that the birds and the bees can sense. Even when animals share the same senses as us, their Umwelten can be very different. There are animals that can hear sounds in what seem to us like perfect silence, see colors in what looks to us like total darkness, and sense vibrations in what feels to us like complete stillness. There are animals with eyes on their genitals, ears on their knees, noses on their limbs, and tongues all over their skin. Starfish see with the tips of their arms, and sea urchins with their entire bodies. The star-nosed mole feels around with its nose, while the manatee uses its lips. Each species is constrained in some ways and liberated in others.
Hi, I'm Percival Everett, and this is my book, Dr. No, and I'll read from the beginning. I recall that I am extremely forgetful. I believe I am. I think I know that I am forgetful. Though I remember having forgotten, I cannot recall what it was that I forgot or what forgetting feels like. When I was a kid, my mother tried to convince me that I was forgetful by saying, "Do you remember when you forgot your own birthday?" I think I replied, "How could I?" But it was a trick question. Saying yes would have been an admission of my forgetfulness, and saying no would have been an example. The brain does what it can, I told her. If we remembered everything, we would have no language for remembering and forgetting. As well, nothing would be important. In fact, nothing is important. The importance of nothing is that it is the measure of that which is not nothing. Is nothing the same as nothingness? Students love to imagine such things. There is, in fact, no nothing. The simplistic argument for the assertion that the observation of nothing requires an observer, and so the presence of the onlooker negates what might have been the pure absence, what might have actually been nothing. If nothing falls in the forest and there is no one around to observe it, does it make a nil? The better argument, one that embodies the simple one and any other, is that one can spell nothing. Parmenides might have been a shabby dresser, but he had a point. The ontological argument might not have worked for the existence of God, but it is indisputable for the existence of nothing. I am Matan, Rian, Nada, Nick, Dimbid, Ikinogit, Ingenting, Waxba, Tidak Ada, Bota, Apa, Kent, Dihil, Ninio. Kind of an ontological argument for the existence of nothing. My name is Wala Kitu. Wala is Tagalog for nothing, though I am not Filipino. Kitu is Swahili for nothing, though my parents are not from Tanzania. My parents, both mathematicians, knew that two negatives yield a positive, therefore I am named Wala Kitu. That is all bullshit, with a capital bull. My name is Ralph Townsend. My mother was an artist. My father was an English professor who ended up driving a taxi. I am, in fact, a mathematician of a sort, but I use the name Wala Kitu. I study nothing.
Hi, I'm Mieko Kawakami, and my book is All the Lovers in the Night, translated by Sam Bett and Debbie Boyd.
Hi, I'm Sam Bett, and I'm one of the translators of All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami. Why does the night have to be so beautiful? As I walk through the night, I remember what Mitsutsuka said to me. Because at night, only half the world remains. I count the lights. All the lights of the night. The red light at the intersection, trembling as if wet, even though it isn't raining. Street light after street light. Taillights trailing off into the distance. The soft glow from the windows. Phones in the hands of people just arriving home. And people just about to go somewhere. Why is the night so beautiful? Why does it shine the way it does? Why is the night made up entirely of light? The music flows from the earphones, filling my ears, filling me. It becomes everything. A lullaby, a gorgeous piano lullaby. What a wonderful piece of music. It really is. It's my favorite piece by Chopin. Did you like it too, Fuyuko? Yeah, it's like the night is breathing, like the sound of melted light. The light at night is special because the overwhelming light of day has left us, and the remaining half draws on everything it has to keep the world around us bright. You're right, Mitsutsuka. It isn't anything, but it's so beautiful that I could cry.
Hi, my name is Namwali Serpel, and I'll be reading from my second novel, The Furrows. I don't want to tell you what happened. I want to tell you how it felt. When I was 12, my little brother drowned. He was 7. I was with him. I swam him to shore. His arms were wrapped around my neck from behind, his chest on my back, his knees pummeling my thighs. At first, his small, heavy head was on my shoulder, and he breathed in my ear, the occasional snort when water came in. His head bounced, my shoulder ached. His hands were knotted at my collarbone, and I held them there with my hand, both so that he wouldn't let go and so that he wouldn't choke me. With my other hand, I pushed the water away. Dear Wayne, you swam into the furrows. At first, you didn't know it because you were under the surface, and you faced down as you swam, staring at the vault of the sea below. Then you felt the sky darken above you, a shadow passing, and when you came up to breathe, you were suddenly inside them, the great grooves in the water, the furrows. On either side of you, those whirring sheets of water, the foam along their edges sharpening like teeth. On either side of you, the furrows chewing, cleaving deeper. They ate you up. You were alone out there, and the world took you back in, reclaimed you into its endless folding. He was joyful and swimming, and then he wasn't. I ran in, I swam to him. I reached him and we grappled some until he managed to get on my back and wrap his arms around my neck. I held his knuckles in my hand. I turned and swam us to shore. He dragged me back. Halfway to the beach, his small, heavy head began to beat against my shoulder in an unreasonable way. That was the word, I thought, unreasonable, a word our father would say. I knew to hold my breath and dive through the waves like our mother had taught us. But what about Wayne? Did he remember to dive, to hold his breath? There was no breath in me to ask or remind him. The wind whipped. I clutched his knuckles like a junk of bones in one hand, pushed the water away with the other. We rocked, his knees bumping the back of me, his head knocking my shoulder in that unreasonable way. It made no sound, but they found bruises later. I felt him soften, and something inside him came into me then, came into me in little waves, more and more ripples until it was done, and my insides felt full up, his body swept clean of him, mine filled to bursting. I swam like this, doubled, an emptied sack on my back, my fingers raw with clutching.
Hi, I'm Ling Ma, and I'm here to read from With Montage. It's a short story collection, and I'll be reading from the story Returning. I began what would become 2 weeks one evening after work, the week I turned 28. In the nights leading up to the procedure, she would have this recurring dream of seeing her face entombed behind a layer of cracked glass, of cracked ice, was the first line that came to me, seemingly from out of nowhere. When she checked the dream dictionary in the morning, she learned that cracked ice was a Chinese expression for the pleasures of marriage in old age. This, she decided, was the auspicious sign she had been waiting for, and so did not hesitate in signing the liability waiver. From then on, I wrote mostly in the nights after work, after arriving home to an overheated studio so small it couldn't accommodate a cartwheel. For fresh air, I could reach in front of my desk and force open the window, the tipsy laughter of neighbors on the stoop suddenly so close. For water, the sink was to the right of the desk. I had the clearest sense of myself then. Everything was within grasping distance. I drank huge amounts of tap water and smoked cigarettes and kept odd hours, staying up as late as I wanted, going to work as tired as I wanted. I had begun the novel after breaking off an engagement and moving out of my then boyfriend's apartment. We'd been together so long enough that the event horizon could only have been marriage, so we got engaged. But the thought of breaking up recurred to me so frequently that it became an inevitability. My ex-fiance, exasperated that I kept prolonging the wedding planning, finally gave me a talk. You think marriage is supposed to be a solution to all dissatisfactions of life, he said, and you're disillusioned because you know marrying me isn't going to solve your other issues, but that's not what marriage is for. This revelation didn't prevent us from breaking up, though. I moved out. In my new studio apartment, I wrote about a married couple who, during an economic depression, decide to cryogenically freeze themselves to be reanimated in the future, with the understanding that their holdings will significantly appreciate during the time they spend iced: their house, their IRAs, their 401ks, their stock portfolio. Given the state of the economy, it was actually cheaper to freeze themselves into the future than to make an earnest effort at a living during this particular period, this political moment. If I felt stuck in the story, I would take a walk, bringing along a can of bear mace the size of a mini fire hydrant, but not very heavy, that my ex-fiance's father had given me. They were the type of family that camouflaged their wealth in outdoor apparel and camping gear. Whatever equipment my intended in-laws had gifted me, I later sold online to pay the bills. My neighborhood at night, menacing and verdant, fields of bobbing chamomile behind chain-link fences, lurking dark sedans slowing to a crawl alongside pedestrians. The cheerful blare of music from a fluorescent paleteria was its own kind of wilderness. I felt thin-skinned, softer, more alert. In the novel, the married couple signs on with a premier cryogenic agency to be frozen for 92 years, the maximum amount of time they can afford. Yet on the morning of the procedure, the wife's icing chamber suffers a glitch and malfunctions. When the anesthesia wears off, the agency explains to her that she will have to undergo the process again, but given the intense preparations and heavy dose of sedatives, she will have to wait 2 weeks. She goes home. The majority of 2 weeks takes place within the span of those 14 days when she is alone and biding her time. I was 29, 30, 31, just biding my time. At some point, I quit my job and lived off my savings, doing occasional freelance work to keep afloat. I kept my overhead low. I stopped going out and I didn't date. I was always current with rent and bills, but often didn't have enough funds for, say, flights home for Christmas. It's better this way, I thought, to set the precedent that my family shouldn't expect too much from me. I pretended I was free, untethered from their immigrant striving, their expectation that my life should somehow justify their sacrifices. Thank you.
I'm Jon Fosse. I've written a novel called Et nytt navn. That's in Norwegian. In English, it's called A New Name. I'm thankful for it all, and especially to my translator, Damien Searles.
My name is Damien Searles, and I'm the translator of A New Name, Septology Parts 6 and 7 by Jon Fosse. And I see myself standing there, looking at the two lines that cross in the middle, one brown and one purple, and I see that I've painted the lines slowly with a lot of thick oil paint, and the paint has run, and where the brown and purple lines cross, the colors have blended beautifully. And I think that I can't look at this picture anymore. It's been sitting on the easel for a long time now, a couple of weeks maybe. So now I have to either paint over it in white or else put it up in the attic, in the crates where I keep the pictures I don't want to sell. But I've already thought that thought day after day, I think. And then I take hold of the stretcher and let go of it again, and I realize that I, who have spent my whole life painting, oil paint on canvas, yes, ever since I was a boy, I don't want to paint anymore, ever. All the pleasure I used to take in painting is gone, I think. And for a couple of weeks now, I haven't painted anything. And I haven't once taken my sketch pad out of the brown leather shoulder bag hanging above the stack of paintings I've set aside over there between the hall door and the bedroom door. And I think that I want to get rid of this painting and get rid of the easel, the tubes of oil paint. Yes, everything. Yes, I want to get rid of everything on the table in the main room, everything that has to do with painting in this room that's been both a living room and a painting studio. And that's how it's been since Alice and I moved in here so long ago. So long ago.
Just wow. Thanks so much to all our amazing authors and translators. And thanks so much for tuning in. Good luck to all. See you tomorrow night in New York City.